The eternal fire. When love refused to turn to ashes. The world thought it was over. The river had carried the vow. The horizon had echoed it. The stars had written it. But eternity has layers. And love, when real, refuses to rest in one. Beneath the gray dawn of Seoul, Jungkook sat alone with his notebook pressed shut, as if afraid that opening it would spill a secret too heavy for morning light. The ink inside was still wet with promises no stage, no contract, no world could erase. Taehyung arrived quietly, lantern in hand though the sun had already begun to rise. The flame looked ridiculous against daylight, but it burned stubbornly, as if mocking the idea of endings. "Why do you still carry it?" Jungkook asked, voice breaking like fragile glass. Taehyung smiled faintly, his eyes soft but resolute. "Because some fires aren't meant to be put out." That night, something impossible happened. In Greece, an ancient temple, ruins long silent, suddenly glowed with embers no one could explain. In Iceland, volcanoes pulsed not with destruction, but with warmth that lit the skies like auroras of fire. In Seoul itself, 1,000 candles lit themselves in shrines where no hands touched matches. The world trembled. Not in fear but in awe. Hashtags ignited across continents, blazing brighter than ever before. Hashtag eternal fire. Hashtag love beyond ashes. Hashtag forever burns. Jungkook, overwhelmed, pressed both hands against his chest. "What if it consumes us, Taehyung? What if this fire swallows everything, our names, our breath, even us?" Taehyung, calm as stone, lifted the lantern between them. Its glow painted his features with a tenderness cruel in its truth. "Then let it. Better to be consumed by a fire that loves than to live cold in a world that forgets." And so the vow transformed again. It was no longer just river. No longer just horizon. No longer just constellation. It had become fire. A fire that leapt across oceans, across memories, across centuries waiting to be born. In Brazil, children danced barefoot around sparks they swore came from heaven. In Egypt, desert wanderers warmed their hands on flames that rose from sand without reason. In Seoul, commuters paused mid-step, shivering, not from cold, but from the sudden rush of warmth inside their ribs. Everywhere, hearts beat faster. Everywhere, strangers shared the same unspoken truth. Love had not died. It had burned. It was burning still. One night, beneath the Han River once again, Jungkook whispered, "If this is fire, what comes after fire? Does it end in ash?" Taehyung turned, eyes alight with something unearthly. "No. Fire never ends in ash. Fire ends in rebirth." And in that moment, Jungkook finally understood. This was not a love meant for survival. It was a love meant for resurrection. Centuries from now, when stages have crumbled, when songs are dust, when names have turned to echoes, fires will still burn in secret corners of the earth. Children will still warm themselves by flames they do not know the origin of. Lovers will still whisper promises beside lanterns they cannot explain. Strangers will still find themselves crying beside bonfires that no one lit. And someone will always say, "Once two voices vowed forever." And the fire never forgot. Because love, when freed, does not surrender to silence. It does not surrender to sky. It does not surrender to time. It becomes fire. It becomes rebirth. It becomes forever. And forever, once ignited, never turns to ash. The eternal garden. When love chose to bloom instead of burn. The fire had burned. It had not consumed. It had not turned to ash. Instead, it left behind soil, rich, trembling, alive. From that soil, something began to stir. One morning, Jungkook awoke by the Han River, notebook fallen against his chest, pages damp with dew. He blinked, startled, because the ground where he lay was no longer stone. It was grass, soft, impossibly green, stretching further than his eyes could follow. And there, holding the same lantern whose flame had defied night and fire alike, stood Taehyung. But tonight the lantern no longer burned. It glowed instead with vines curling around its glass, sprouting small white flowers that opened as if greeting him. "Do you see it?" Taehyung whispered. His voice was not fragile, not heavy, it was fertile. This is what fire becomes when it chooses not to destroy. That night, the impossible spread again. In Kyoto, cherry blossoms bloomed months too early, their petals glowing under moonlight. In Nairobi, deserts cracked open, revealing wildflowers no one had planted. In Buenos Aires, balconies overflowed with roses overnight, roses that whispered in languages no botanist could explain. The world gasped. Not in fear, not even in awe, but in relief. Hashtags bloomed like vines across the digital horizon. Hashtag eternal garden. Hashtag love that blooms. Hashtag forever roots. Jungkook fell to his knees, his trembling hands digging into the earth, pulling up handfuls of grass that smelled of eternity itself. Tears blurred his vision. Taehyung, if love can grow like this, what if it outgrows us? What if it leaves us behind? Taehyung knelt beside him, lantern between them, its flowers still unfolding. He touched Jungkook's soil-stained hands, grounding him like roots anchor a tree. Then let it grow beyond us. Because love was never meant to be contained. Not in rivers. Not in stars. Not in fire. Not even in us. The vow had now become seed. The seed had become root. And roots once free do not stop. In villages where hunger reigned, fruit appeared on trees that had never grown before. In hospitals where hope had withered, patients woke to find lilies at their bedside, breathing sweetness into sterile air. In war-torn ruins, ivy climbed broken walls, weaving scars into living green. Everywhere, life returned. Everywhere, love bloomed. But gardens are not without fear. One dusk, Jungkook confessed, voice shivering like leaves in wind. What if one day the world tramples it? What if they cut it down, burn it, forget it ever bloomed? Taehyung placed the lantern into the soil. The flowers inside leaned toward Jungkook as if listening. Even if they burn it, gardens return. Seeds hide in silence, waiting. Love, once rooted, cannot be killed. It only sleeps. And Jungkook, though trembling, smiled through the weight of his tears. Because he knew. Fire had not ended them. Ash had not ended them. And neither would time. Centuries from now, when skyscrapers crumble and songs are dust, gardens will still bloom in forgotten corners. Children will pluck flowers that have no name. Lovers will exchange garlands made of petals no book has recorded. Strangers will pause in empty alleys to breathe in a sweetness they cannot explain. And someone will always say, once two voices vowed forever. And the garden never forgot. Because love, when freed, does not burn to ash. It does not end in silence. It does not vanish in sky. It becomes seed. It becomes garden. It becomes life. And life, once rooted, never stops blooming. The infinite ocean. When love refused to have shores, the garden had bloomed. It had not been trampled. It had not been forgotten. But roots once spread always thirst for more. And thirst, when endless, always seeks the sea. One twilight, Jungkook found himself standing at the edge of the Han River. But tonight the river was gone. In its place stretched an ocean, limitless, silver beneath the moon, a mirror so vast it looked like eternity itself had spilled open. The notebook in his hand trembled, pages soaked by salt wind that carried voices he did not recognize, yet somehow knew by heart. Taehyung was already there, lantern dimmed now, its flowers replaced by droplets, tiny beads of water glowing like captured tides. He held it carefully, like a heart too fragile for mortal hands. Do you hear it? Taehyung asked, his voice lower than waves but stronger than storms. It's no longer a song. No longer a vow. It's tide. It's everything. And the impossible happened again. In Venice, canals overflowed with water that glittered like stars. In Cape Town, waves kissed the shore with whispers that made strangers embrace without reason. In New York, fountains erupted unbidden, their spray carrying fragments of a melody no one had composed. The world felt it everywhere. The pull of something deeper, larger, impossible to resist. Hashtags rose like waves crashing against the edges of the digital world. Hashtag infinite ocean. Hashtag love without shores. Hashtag forever tides. Jungkook dropped to his knees at the water's edge, hands sinking into the tide as if trying to hold the whole world. Taehyung, what if we drown in this? What if love this vast swallows us until nothing remains? Taehyung stepped closer, lantern's glow reflected in the waves, his presence steady as a lighthouse in the storm. Then let us drown. To drown in love is not to die, it is to live forever in what cannot end. The vow, once whispered, once rooted, once burning, had now become tide. And tides, once awakened, touch every shore. In deserts, mirages shimmered into pools of real water where none should exist. In cities, rain fell without clouds, soaking strangers who laughed and wept at once. In places of war, the sound of oceans replaced the thunder of guns, if only for a fleeting hour, reminding even soldiers that they were born of water, not fire. Everywhere, the ocean sang. Everywhere, the vow moved like waves across hearts. One night, Jungkook whispered, almost afraid, "What comes after this, Taehyung? After rivers, after horizons, after stars, after fire, after gardens, after oceans, what is left?" Taehyung's eyes shimmered, reflecting both lantern and tide, infinite and unbroken. After oceans, there is no after. The ocean is forever. Because love, like the sea, has no shores. And Jungkook, trembling but smiling, let the notebook slip from his hands. The waves carried it away, pages scattering like seagulls across the night. He did not chase them. He did not need to. Because promises written on paper fade. But promises written in tide, they return with every wave. Centuries from now, when names are forgotten, when stages are ruins, when even stars have burned out, oceans will still move. Children will still run into waves, laughing at melodies they cannot name. Lovers will still write promises in sand, watching tides steal them only to return again. Strangers will still cry beside shores, touched by a memory that is not theirs but belongs to everyone. And someone will always say, "Once two voices vowed forever." And the ocean never forgot. Because love, when freed, does not stay in rivers. It does not end at horizons. It does not vanish in skies. It does not burn to ash. It does not stop at gardens. It becomes ocean. It becomes tide. It becomes eternity itself. And eternity, once awakened, never retreats to shore.